All right, hello and welcome everyone to another Why Would You Use. Today we're going to be going over a very simple weapon, the Stradavar Prime, and it is simple but effective. It is just a really basic rifle that has two modes. It has a semi-auto mode and a fully automatic mode. Both modes are actually pretty solid. I actually have no problem with either one, and they're used for different scenarios, which is a bit of a new thing for a lot of weapons that have multiple modes. You just end up with one of them being the best and you never using the others. So this is a nice unique situation. This is the build that I have thrown on here. It is worth noting that this is a full prime cryo rounds prime shred build, and it's only 3 forma because this does come with a number of polarities just to start, and that is very nice, making this build actually quite cheap overall in terms of its forma investment. And the stats on this weapon are just good. It is worth noting that I have tested this weapon with hunter munitions instead of vigilante armaments, but pretty much every single time vigilante armaments is outperforming hunter munitions on this weapon specifically. So that's definitely worth noting, because you'd think that hunter munitions would be super amazing, but with the kind of IPS spread change that you get on the secondary fire, it actually ends up not being very important, and you're going to proc a good amount of slash on that secondary fire mode if you really need to proc it. So Vigilante Armaments just outperforms it because the consistent and also bonus multi-shot can really help this weapon out in taking out some higher level enemies. Anyway, what is the main deal with this weapon? Basically, it is a really good full auto weapon that has a very low amount of recoil. This is, of course, with prime tread, making it fire considerably faster. So it's basically a laser beam. And then in its semi-auto mode, it actually fires 2 shots per trigger pull. And that is very important because it means that this is much better at proccing status than you might first surmise, because you get a lot of procs from each shot if you're going to be getting procs, which is why, of course, I'm using the dual stat elemental instead of just a second full elemental on the build. Anyway, let's jump in here, and I'm going to show off one run through of this with just full auto and one run through of this with the semi-auto, so you can see how good each side is roughly. And it turns out that they're both quite good. Although I think specifically at this level 50 test at lower level enemies, because I have prime shred on the weapon, the secondary fire will generally perform a little bit better. But of course, full auto is for situations where you have a bunch of enemies that you need to mow down in a hallway, and prime shred is on here for that purpose. Because if you just have a bunch of enemies in a line, which tends to be the case in Warframe, much like what just happened there, you're gonna just want to be shooting a ton of bullets down a hallway and killing everyone in a row. Obviously, that is still totally possible with the semi-auto, but you're gonna have to be a little bit more precise with it, and that's not really the Warframe stylings. So anyway, let's move on to the semi-auto test. The semi-auto test, it is worth noting that at higher levels, usually what you want to do is if an enemy has a bunch of armor, you spray them with the non-semi-auto, the full auto, and then you finish them off with the semi-auto with headshots, just because it does so much more damage in bursts and also has the ability to proc slash like you want. But you can see this is quite effective at taking these enemies out, especially whenever we get the slash procs in there. But yeah, pretty much a headshot on any of these level 50 enemies will eliminate them in short order. You can see the ability to shoot through walls being very helpful there. And all these other lower level enemies pretty much just die instantly. Which, hey, that's what you want. Level 50 is obviously above what you're normally going to encounter in Warframe, so this being able to vaporize them on really either mode means that depending on what you want, you can just use one or the other. You can just go full auto all the time, or you can just go semi-auto all the time, and they're both super viable. So if you were looking for either of those kinds of weapons, this is pretty good, and it's not going to cost you 5 forma to max it out, so that's definitely a bonus. Anyway, that is going to do it for today's Why Would You Use? And one more note at the end here. Does anyone actually give a fuck about the Tipedo Prime? I need to know. Let me know in the comments, because I need to know if anyone actually gives a fuck about that weapon, because it seems really not worth talking about. But if people really want me to talk about it, I'll put it into a Why Would You Use. I'll do it. It'll be a thing that'll happen. So yeah, I will see you guys later. Hope you enjoyed this video, and goodbye, everybody.